I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I just needed to find an opportunity to do this. This is one of my new plants that I got from our club's show and sale that we had this weekend. I've got many plants from our club's show and sale this weekend, but this one is from Optimara. This is Optimara My Wild Side, and I picked it because as you can see, I'm already through my cleanup process. For my process, what I do is I remove damaged leaves. This one had quite a few damaged leaves, and I also remove the blossoms, and I love these little blossoms. They look like little cabbages, so that's it's kind of unusual, so that's why I decided to get this plant. But I was most of the way through my cleanup process. If you've seen my video on what I do when I get new plants to my collection, what I do is I remove damaged leaves, I remove all of the flowers and flower buds, and when I was looking through this plant has a rather large sucker on it. And I've probably shown you suckers before, but most of them were very small. So if you don't know what they are, a sucker is basically another plant growing off of the main plant. And this one is actually quite huge. And one of the questions you may have is, well, how can I tell what a sucker is? Basically, you kind of look at how the leaves are growing, and they're supposed to be growing around a centralized crown, kind of like this one, if you can see. So you have the leaves at the very center of the crown, and you have the rest of the leaves growing around it. In this case, you have two. So you have, and you can also take a look at the way the stems are growing, because you see this stem and this stem is growing around this center here, and this stem is growing around this center. So basically I have two plants here. So this is what me and the group like to call bonus plants. Sometimes you'll get suckers that are so big that they grow into their own little plant. So you have two crowns. So you have, I don't know if you can see this, you have this crown here, and then you have this smaller crown over here. So you see how the leaves are growing around the center. So what do? In a lot of cases, you could just simply repot this, and then you're just gonna have two plants on here. I don't like doing that, because especially if you want to have a nice looking plant and one that kind of controls the growing, you want to have one center crown. And I don't know which is the main plant. You can kind of see a little bit better here. Okay, that leaf belongs here. And okay, I think this leaf belongs here. You kind of have to take a look to see where the leaves are coming out of. So yeah, if you take a little look, you can see which leaves belong to what. And there is, and right there is where the crown is, where the sucker is shooting off of. I'm not sure which one is which. I don't know which one is the main plant. I don't know which one's the sucker. I'm gathering to believe that maybe this one is, because the leaves are a little bit smaller than this one. So what do? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this guy from what I'm calling this one the main plant. So what you just need to do is you need to find all the leaves that are growing off, and then you just kind of work your way off of them, and you're going to end up breaking some leaves. I think I heard a leaf break. And you just kind of prise this off of the main plant, because you are going to break some leaves. And actually, you may have some luck if you get something like a scalpel or a knife or something like that to help you break it apart from the main plant. I think in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that from the main stem. And I'm going to try and cut it here as close to the stem as I can, kind of loosen it up some. Yeah, here we go. There. All right, see, now we're separated here. Yep, there's a main stem. There goes another leaf. That's fine. That one's broken anyway. All right. And so in the case of a sucker this big, you know, you have a lot of roots here, so I want to see if I can keep as many of the roots from the sucker as possible. So just kind of try to work your way to having some roots come along with it, because otherwise it's going to have to grow some roots all over again, and then Yeah, see, now we're teasing these apart. Yep, see, now it has their own roots there. And if you're nervous about doing some kind of operation like this, you don't have to take the sucker. Okay, there we go. Yep. See, its own little plantlet here. Has its own flower buds and its own root system. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and I'm just going to pot it up, and it's going to be just like any regular plantlet that you get when you propagate a plant. You just kind of pot it up. Okay, and see, yeah, this is where it grew out from. So this has to be the main plant because there's the stem right there. Okay. All right, and so this is the mother plant. I took off a ton of leaves. A lot of them were damaged, so that's fine. So with the mother plant, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish cleaning her up and then put her back in the pot. And then with this little sucker, this little bonus plant, I'm going to put it in its own pot and see if I can encourage it to grow some more, because it's already, yeah, it already has flower buds here. So I'm going to remove those so I can encourage it to just simply grow a little bit more. I'm removing any kind of dead other broken stems here near the root of the stem of this one. And yeah, so that's how you remove a pretty big sucker from a mother plant. I'm hoping this should be fine. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to clean this mother plant up, repot her, bonide, and then tent her, and see how she does. And then I'm going to have the little sister plant right there. All right, so that is a quick tutorial on removing big suckers from plants that you may have. Like I said, if you're nervous about it, just keep it on there. But I like having more plants, so it's always a cool thing to have a bonus plant. All right, thanks for watching.
A few moments later.
And here we go again. I have another plant here that I'm cleaning up that also has a sucker on it. So this one isn't quite as big as the other one, the Optimera Wildside. This one is actually RS Ariel. And yeah, this one has a decent sized sucker. So showing you how to detect them again. You see how you have a well-defined crown. So you have plants, leaves growing out from one central area, except for these guys. See, notice how they're not quite growing around that stem like they're supposed to. This is a sucker. This is a smaller one. These leaves are kind of growing not around the center here, but off the side, like so. All right, so like the other one, you can just kind of pull this off. I don't think this one it's nowhere near as big as the other one. The other one was almost as big as the mother plant itself. This one's a little smaller, but it's definitely not a tiny sucker. So this one you can just the last one I had to cut off, so this one I might be able to pull. Oh, there goes a leaf. You know what I'm doing with that one. And actually that'll make it easier for me to kind of grab this guy. So, or if you want to be more precise, you could probably cut it off. Let me remove more soil around the area here. I love this little metal chopstick. This helps clear off topsoil, loosen up root balls. It's a really handy tool. And again, you can either take the sucker and throw it away. I'm just going to pot this up. Okay, so there it is. So it's these 4 leaves. 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves, and then like a very tiny one in the center there. So I think I'm going to try and cut this one too. Smaller suckers that you don't want to keep, you could probably just pull off if you want to pull it off. And then I also just sterilized my knife here. Right here, that's where it's coming off of mama plant. So just very gentle cut there to make it easier. There. Okay, yep, I got a tiny root here. Look, we got 4 leaves and like 2 tiny ones growing there. So, got another bonus plant out of this one. And okay, I actually might have more suckers here. All right, see how it's growing weird? They're supposed to be growing this way and they're growing sideways instead. That looks like actually have multiple ones here. So we have this one and a smaller one right here, that one. Okay, so multiple bonus plants we got in here. All right, this one I'm just gonna pull off because it's small and I already got one and I don't want to really mess with that one. So I'm just pulling that off. See where it grew there? And I'm gonna do the same for this one. I'm just gonna pull it off. For these smaller ones, that's how you, and actually that might, okay, these leaves might actually go with this one. A lot of times it's guesswork. Yep, so these leaves goes with this sucker here. So you just kind of have to observe and see how the leaves are growing to see where the suckers are. Okay, so I might actually cut this one because it has bigger leaves. It doesn't have the smaller ones. So the ones with the smaller leaves, I tend to just pull off. If they're a little bit bigger and they have a chance of growing on their own, that's where I usually try to cut them. All right. Okay, so right here where it meets, just a small cut. And there's no guarantee that these will survive. There we go. Oh, there. I might try to water propagate this one, to put it in water, see if it'll grow some roots. So actually this will give me a perfect opportunity to kind of experiment. So I'll put this one in dirt, put this one on water, and see what happens. So this one is RS Ariel, beautiful flower, it's a lovely flower. And actually this one looks like, this looks like it was part of that smaller, this one, you see the center here? So this one looks like it was actually part of that smaller one that I pulled out, so. Okay, yep. So we'll see. It doesn't have a crown anymore, so we'll see what happens. Okay, and so that's what I have left here. Seems like I kind of scalped the poor thing, but you know, if you've seen my video on how to prepare your plants for your collection, you know I scalp my plants before I add them to my collection, so you've come to suspect that. So, all right, so found more suckers. Okay, I've got 2 more plants to do, so if I find any more, I'll show you how I handle those. And we're back for a 3rd time, so I'm getting a lot of bonus plants out of the plants that I got. So this is Black Pearl. This is another Russian-Ukrainian variety here. Lovely, lovely dark blossoms here. And I found more suckers. Now that I've shown you the blossoms, I'm just going to go ahead and remove them because that's part of the process. All right, let's see if you can spot it. If you guessed right here, that's exactly right. So you see it's growing kind of crazy from the rest of the leaves in the violet. There's actually more than one. Can you spot the other one? Yep, if you guessed this one, there you go. All right, so, and a lot of these are good sized ones. Just spotted another one. Can you see it? There you go. All right, so lots of cleanup to do here. So, all right, let's assess where these suckers are coming from. What's part of the main plant? What's part of the mama plant? And just so you know, in between me processing these different plants, I always sterilize the tools that I'm using. So like in between me cutting the suckers out of the first plant and the second plant and now this plant, I'm constantly sterilizing the tools. This is the crown of the plant, and anything growing weird is going to be a sucker. So, and we're going to cut, hopefully not cut myself, but we're gonna try to gently trim away from the mother plant. Okay, there. Oh, looks like maybe this leaf was part of it, but that's okay. All right, see? Now we've got, see, it has its own little crown. Looks like there's another one right beside it. Gentle cut here. Okay. You don't have to cut all the way through. Sometimes you just need to cut just enough to prise it away. There we go. There's number 3. Anything that's growing different direction, see? Different directions here. So, okay, very careful. I'm just trying to separate, or cut it enough to separate. Try to keep the crown. If you want to keep the sucker, you want to try to keep the crown of it intact. Okay, it looks like this leaf goes with that. There we go. All right. That is number, which one? That's number 3. Yikes. Some plants seem to be prone to throwing these out. And sometimes it's because you're not grooming your plant and you don't grab them and stop them before they start growing. That's why you always need to be pulling leaves off your plant. But I don't mind suckers on new plants so much because it's like propagating without me doing all the work. All right, that is number 4. Number 4. Oh, and this one came right off. Okay. Number 5. Crazy amount of suckers on this one. All right, so now we have a much smaller plant, but we have that rosette pattern here. All right, and you're probably wondering, gosh, poor plant. That's fine, it'll be fine. These plants are tougher than you think. Okay, as long as you leave plenty of leaves to do the photosynthesis and, to grow and everything, it'll be just fine. Okay, so my greatly scalped but tons of suckers on that one. Okay, so I didn't get this because my phone was running out of space, but on Little Moonstone I found 3 suckers. So 2 of them kind of disintegrated as soon as I pulled them off. They had no crowns to speak of, so there's no point in trying to save those. But I did get a decent sized one on the side here. So and it even has roots. So I'm gonna pop that one up. So out of my cleanup for today, I got, and let's see what the entire total of the day. So out of Little Moonstone, I got 1 sucker. Out of Whispered Blue, I didn't get any. Out of Black Pearl, I think Black Pearl holds the record with 5 suckers. Out of RS Ariel, I got 3. And my wild side, that was just basically one big sucker. So I basically got 2 plants out of my wild side. All right, so I've been wanting to do a video on suckers, so this gave me a great opportunity on showing you what they are and how to handle them. So finally, thanks for watching. That should be the end because that's all the plants I have for right now. Thanks for watching.
Many months later.
Hi. So, I know I just said that this is the end of the video, but this is future me finally getting around to editing the video, and I spotted a couple of things that I kind of wanted to update since I've done a lot more rooting suckers and planting them, and I kind of wanted to update the information that I had in the video already. And since I also recorded the entire process of me putting down the suckers and actually following through on my experiment with rooting suckers in water, I just decided, hey, if I'm going to do this, may as well just add this to the rest of the video. So this is future me kind of stepping back in and giving you a couple more pointers on how to root them in water if you wanted to, or how to plant them in soil. And so the first thing that you want to do before you do anything with your suckers, if there's a lot of dirt on them, because in the process you might get a lot of dirt on your suckers, especially if these are brand new and you had to kind of dig them out for a while, you want to brush off as much dirt as you can, possibly. And this is especially important if you're planning on trying to root these guys in water, because you don't want to have anything in your water that will end up making your water, cloudy and kind of interrupt that whole process. So you want to start off by brushing off as much dirt off of your sucker as possible. Then the next thing you want to do is, the water that I'm using to root these suckers is distilled water. Now, I learned this when I was trying to root leaves in water. The tap water in our area is not great. There's a lot of chloridomides in it, and there's also stuff in certain types of locality or municipal water sources that isn't good for rooting leaves, and it certainly isn't good for rooting suckers and anything like that. So you want to start off with distilled water
water, and I've also recently learned that you may want to have a little bit of fertilizer in your water. So any kind of water that's distilled, you might want to add a tiny bit of fertilizer on it, kind of like make it lightly fertilized. That may help you root the suckers even faster. So that's a tip that I just recently learned. Now the reservoirs that I'm using in order to root these suckers is just nothing more than little condiment cups with the lids on them. And the same way that I put holes in the bottoms of these cups that I'm using, and I'm going to talk about these cups in a minute because I want to update on that as well. But the plastic lid that I use, I just basically burn a hole in them using a hot soldering iron, and I make the holes big enough so that you can stick the entire sucker in there, but tight enough so that it's able to support it in the water without it falling into the water, because they seem to do really well if you have like the bottom part so you can start rooting the sucker in there. You start having leaves fall into the water, then you're running the risk of having the leaves rot, especially if you're using tap water. You run the risk of the leaves getting soft and mushy, and that kind of fouls the water up, and you certainly don't want to do that when you're trying to grow roots in your sucker. So make sure that the hole is just big enough for you to put the entire sucker in there, but small enough that it's able to support. And I'm able to do that with you don't have to use a soldering iron. Some people use like a large hole punch, or they cut it out, but whatever you use, just make sure that you have a good size for that sucker so you're able to support it. And you just want to wait for a while. I think it took like maybe I want to say a couple weeks before the first roots started coming out of these suckers. It may take like a couple weeks, a month, just so that you have a decent amount of roots before you try to plant these suckers that you're rooting in water. So, and I know there's a little bit of a controversy about roots that are grown in water versus roots that are grown in soil. Some people say that the roots grown in water are weaker than the ones that are grown in soil. Since this video, rooting in water has become one of my favorite things to do, so I've never really had a problem with it. So if you want to just go for it, there's no reason why you can't go for it. So just follow these steps there, and you should be doing beautifully rooting your suckers in the distilled water. And just like everything, you just want to make sure that you have enough light. They get the same amount of light the rest of your plants do. You do want to make sure that the water level stays steady. You don't want to dry those out. If you do happen to forget, I know this now because I've had this happen. If you do happen to forget and the reservoir does dry out, you don't want to disturb whatever roots that you have. Just make sure that you add enough water, and hopefully that should rehydrate whatever roots that got dried out. So, and then once you get enough roots, which I will show at the end of the video, once you get enough roots, you just pot it up, just as usual. So, that's using a water method in order to root your suckers. That's one method. It takes a little bit longer because you have to wait for the roots to show up, but like I said, it's become one of my favorite things to do because it's just so much fun watching those roots form. And then I'm also sure that these guys are getting roots before I stick the sucker in the soil, because just using it with direct to soil method, it's kind of guesswork to see when these guys start rooting. And I've also found that especially if you're using distilled water, I also found that there's a little less prone to rotting if you use the water rooting method. Go figure. But that's the result that I've seen. All right, so now if you just want to pot your sucker directly in soil, perhaps you have a good amount of roots in your with the sucker that you have, or you just don't want to fiddle with the entire rooting in water method. It's just basically the same kind of routine that you do when you're potting up your other violets. You just put in your soil. I do wick water, so I insert my wicks in as you're seeing in the video. I do put my wicks in before I put in the plant. Usually in the routine, I do put bonide, the systemic granules, in order to keep any kind of pest under control. If you've been watching closely in the video, you might have noticed that I hadn't done that in this group. When I first started putting suckers in soil, I skipped the entire bonide step because bonide usually works if you do have roots. These guys don't have roots, so I didn't see the point of actually putting systemic crystals in there. But on second thought, when these guys start growing roots, you do want to have the systemic around so that they start absorbing that into their roots. So kind of slightly altered the method that you're seeing here by including bonide systemic in with the soil. So that's one change that I did want to update while you're watching the video. And then the other thing that I do want to update is that I've also changed the size of the cups that I use when I am potting up suckers. So the size of the cups I'm using here are 3-ounce cups, and I've discovered that those are way too big. I started off with the 3-ounce cups because that's kind of like what I standard put in plantlets. But especially like with some of these smaller suckers that don't have roots, that is a lot of damp soil that can run the risk of actually starting root rot in your sucker. So what I use, especially with smaller suckers, I use the smaller 2-ounce cups, and those are kind of like the Red Solo shot size cups, those smaller red cups. And so I found that I had a lot more success using those smaller cups because remember, it's not about the size of the sucker, but it's the fact that it doesn't have roots. You don't want to have a whole lot of damp soil around it because that does invite root rot or crown rot. It does invite an element of that, so one way to avoid that is 1, you root in water because you'll have those roots there. And then 2, use a smaller cup that I'm using here in the example. Most of these came out fine. I did have a couple that I had some issues with, and I discovered that was likely the problem. So this is a great method to use. I would just advise that you use a smaller cup instead of like these white 3-ounce cups. All right, so hopefully that will help you out. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Like I said, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you the results of some of those guys that I stuck in water. You get to see the new roots, and you get to see the method. You get to see me repot those guys once they had some brand new roots. So once again, thanks for sticking with me through this entire video. I know it's long, but I'm hoping that you guys learned a lot. All right, thanks for watching.
Thank you.